Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To some and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. You know, first let me give a shout out to S. Jock because he made me aware of more than one story, but the link between them, what they both show together, explains something that I didn't go too much in depth about, but it's still valid. And um, that has to do with number one, this cop, this officer, who was found asleep in a police car. He was sleeping, but he was passed out and he was holding a meth pipe. He was discovered because he fell asleep in his cruiser, waiting on a traffic light to turn green. Think about that. There's a website about that, but I don't know about this being on TV and it's not making national news. And this is in Mississippi. They're not really going to plaster this on every news station the way they would have if this had been a black officer. While this is happening and this man's crime is not plastered on mainstream media the way you'd expect, at least not from what I can see over here. We already know what would happen. And at the same time that this is going on, I understand why it is that SWP is as frustrated as he is. I do not support his conclusions that all religions are scam. I do not support his notions that there is no God, and I don't support the notion that Islam is just one of those ain't black enough religions on the shelf like everything else. I don't support that notion. I don't support these conclusions. I don't support Dr. Umar's conclusions, but their frustrations are rooted in something that's real. And the frustration is rooted in two things. Number one, it is the fact that no matter where you go, if you are black, we're catching it. And number two, black religion is an issue. It's not Islam per se, because it's a revelation. And when a revelation is actually revealed and then protected, then it doesn't cause trouble because you follow the instructions. The true instructions are not going to cause you a punishment. But black religion, whether it's nigger churchism, and I've said it like that for a reason, or it's nigger Judaism or niglam, is going to cause you to suffer because of something specific to black people, regardless of nationality. You don't have to be ADOS or FBA to suffer from this. You don't have to be Haitian or Jamaican or Congolese to suffer from this, or South African or Nigerian. This is something specific to black people as a race and to a few other groups of people along the equator. And that is that I mentioned this last time, and I meant to. That is a notion many black folks have, that the purpose of life is to suffer. The purpose is to worship, but we get stuck on this notion that the purpose is to suffer, and therefore we wind up suffering more because we think that's what we're here for. We don't even recognize or validate acts of worship until they bring about suffering, or we think that they bring about suffering. or they're done in such a way as to bring about suffering, even if that's not what the revelation and the instructions therein said to do. That's why it is that the Quran will tell you to share with the poor and do not neglect your responsibility to yourself and to your family. And then you go to a nigger church and the pastor saying, give till it hurts. You can go to a nigger mosque. I'm not saying a black masjid per se, but you can go to some nigger masajid. And they only talk about how Abu Bakr gave in charity to the point that people thought he was going to be poor, or until he was poor, or something like that. Had money, gave it away. They'll only talk about these things. They'll talk about how it is that some Sahaba only fasted extra fast during the summer, and they only prayed the extra night prayers called tahajjud or qiyam al-layl, meaning standing the night in the winter. They only took the extra credit acts of worship under the most difficult conditions. And I'll sit up and tell you that. Now, there are some non-black folks that have the same problem, don't get me wrong, but they may get away with it. We don't. And we do have this pro-suffering mindset, regardless of what religion we approach. And I do think that that was largely due to colonization and enslavement. I think that's where a lot of that started. I honestly believe that that's why it is that even African Muslims today tend to have that mindset. I don't hear about them having a mindset of just pro-suffering from before colonization, but they were Muslim. Because as I stated before, non-black Muslims did not invade Black Africa and force Islam on the people. The North is a different story. By that point, we would sit up here and debate about if the North was even black or which parts, take your pick. But in tropical Black Africa, that's not how it spread. And I don't hear about black folks sitting up and saying, well, hey, the purpose of this life is to suffer. It may be to be tested. Or rather, I should say the test is guaranteed, but the test is of ease and hardship. But the purpose is to worship. It's not to enjoy or to suffer. It's to worship. Suffering and hardship are just both guarantees if you live long enough. But after colonization on the continent and then the colonization and enslavement in the New World, no matter what religion black folks have, we just think that the purpose of us being here is to suffer because it's been our condition for so long. Now that is frustrating as hell. And then we take this, the SWP is right about the fact that we take on this magical way of thinking at times, failing to understand that even the Quran explains miracles are great. Some of them are every day, but they're still miraculous. But magic is an evil tool, and the devil's not going to use magic to help black people. Most of us should know that already. He hates us too much. I talked about that before. If the devil's behind magic and any apparent success that magic might have, or success a person has practicing it, that's the demons that have to be behind that. And the devil himself hates Adam first and foremost, and by extension, whoever most closely resembles him. Then do you think he's going to allow any of his employees to carry out magic on behalf of human beings in a way that would benefit black people? No. The devil hates people in general. He doesn't really allow magic to be carried out in a way by his employees that would benefit human beings. But if he hates black folks with a priority, it definitely better not help out black people. Any magic done is going to be for the purpose of harming black people. And this happened in South Africa. I think they might call it the Infekane. I'm not really sure if that's the name of it, but it was a great drought and famine. Well, not drought, but it was a great famine that was caused by one lady from the Xhosa people who said that these white spirits appeared to her at the river and told her a new world is coming on this particular date. Y'all need to cut your cattle up, slaughter them, because you can't take your possessions from this world with you into the new world when it comes, and it's going to manifest here in the same location. So she told the people, and those who were faithful slaughtered their cattle. They had nothing to eat when this new world did not manifest itself. Those who were not faithful had cattle for a while, but then they quickly didn't have any other cattle with which to trade, so they wound up starving too. Even if they didn't expect the new world to manifest itself, they were eventually going to run out. Time of great famine and hunger. I think this was in the 1800s at some point, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe the 17th. I forgot exactly when this was. But you understand how it is that whoever these demons were that appeared to this lady at the river, they were not going to tell her something that was going to help black folk. You see where this is going? I do understand that many of us will simply abandon all analytical thinking so that we go from believing that miracles are within the capacity of an all-powerful God to relying on miracles to get by at a very basic, not even basic, but to get by at a very unsatisfactory level. We're not the only people to go through it. We're not the only ones to suffer, but we are among a few peoples of the planet, not the only race, but we're among the few peoples of the planet to think that the suffering is our purpose and that therefore we really just ain't even going to try to stop. I know. You see, we ain't the only niggas on the planet, as I stated before. The Bedouins here had that problem. The true religion can be in your hands, and the truth of the religion still won't help you if you misapply it. Well, these guys here don't engage in analytical thinking. I had to fuss at my students today about that. I always got an excuse. Every time I tell them something, excuse, 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 excuse. That's all these ninjas got, excuses. They don't have anything but excuses. You would look at them and you would think, really? You got to be kidding me. So no matter what I tell you, no matter how soon in advance I tell you whatever it is that I tell you, if I pretty much don't show you the test itself before you take the test, you're going to fail because you have to think and study otherwise. I gave an assignment. One of the requirements was that they cite their sources with MLA format. Some never cited a source, others cited them, but all they did was paste the link, no MLA format to the link. They didn't even look it up. They didn't even use AI to generate the proper format for the citations. Nothing of that nature, just niggerish. They abandoned all analytical thinking. I told them that their subjects had to be nations within the Americas, but not the U.S. Do you know that most of them chose to make their subject nation Saudi Arabia? Because they didn't read the instructions. And they started coming to me when they got these 10% marks. They came to me, well, we didn't know what you meant. Nigga, that's not my fault. I said it twice in the directions. Twice in the directions. One of them told me the translation was wrong. Nigga, that's not my fault either. I didn't mistranslate it, and you're not supposed to rely on a translation of the whole thing in an advanced English class. These is niggas, man. There's nothing I tell my students once that I don't have to say again a second time and a third time. Absolutely nothing. We think we're the only ones like this, and I'm telling you that we're not. However, the difference is that we do not have a nation like theirs with an economy like theirs. We don't get away with being that stupid. I've watched black people that are Muslim in America get into some of the most dumb, niggified arguments because of sound interference, not clearly hearing what one person said. And while I'm up here trying to shout to them both to tell them that one simply misheard the other because of the clanging of the pans in the back, which drowned out part of what he said, and he didn't say anything about anybody's mama that was derogatory. And I can't get a word in edgewise because they're niggas and they're mad. But both of them Muslim. I'll just go ahead and say it. Goddamn jigaboos. Now that is enough to justify the feeling of frustration that SWP has. Meanwhile, white officers, as we've seen, just get away with so much. A meth pipe passed out in a police cruiser at a traffic light. What if he had fallen asleep while the car was in motion? What if his foot had come off of the brake? Any of that, just stop and think about that. What if that is what had happened? And they buried his story. It's in an obscure website. As Jacques sent me the link. But on TV, maybe if you're around Mississippi and specifically that area, you might have heard about it on TV. Maybe not. But shouldn't it be plastered on TV with his face the way it would be if he'd been black? What the fuck is going on? You got to scour websites like this to find out about the crimes that they're committing, but they're just as dysfunctional. And this also does give SWP a valid sense of frustration. We get away with nothing. Now, Dr. Omar, he's on some other stuff. He sits up and tells you why he was wrong and then tells you his conclusion. That's not worshiping God. That's the deification of Arab culture. Yeah, Dr. Umar himself distinguished between Islam as a religion and the deification of Arabic culture as some nigger business. He made that distinction and then said, so he has to walk away from Islam because nobody else was practicing it. What? If it's the truth and nobody else is practicing it, that's not why you walk away. That's why you hold on to it. You're going to get their houses in paradise, brother. I say that with sarcasm. But SWP does have a sense of frustration that is legitimized. Though I do not support his conclusion that that there's no correct religion or that there's no God. I don't support that. But his frustration is legitimate, and we're the ones that oftentimes have it because as a people, we hate to engage in analytical thinking. We don't like to think ahead. We don't do this either. The Arabs also had that problem, but we don't have a nation and we don't have an economy that will support that. Now, you got most Arab countries, out of 22 of them, only 6 are Gulf nations. The rest of them are poor. That's real. They don't engage in analytical thinking either, but their countries are what you would call their countries crap holes. You would say this. This is something you would say. So In all honesty, I'm not going to sit up and tell you that they get away with it, but we focused on them. So even when people don't necessarily get away with being this way, the fact remains that you as black folks don't get to see the ones that don't get away with it in most cases. And this is why it is that what I will say is that in order to understand why I don't have any more the same frustration that SWP has and why I have not had it for decades, is because I live abroad. He's been able to see people from abroad, but over there in the States. And that's an easy way to feel if that's what you're exposed to. But when you get to live abroad and you get to live in the nations of some of these folks that in the US you're told to look up to, then you realize they were cherry-picked, hand-picked. I knew that was the case before I left, but I could see firsthand now that I'm here. You got some really stupid mother cuss words over here. And when I say stupid, I mean you got people here that would make you think that education here must be prohibitively expensive because of their level of stupidity. And then it's artificial. They practice being dumb. They don't have to be this damn stupid. But you won't know if you don't actually get to meet people from these communities, let alone live in some of these nations. You got to live in some of these places to find out. You stop holding people up on a pedestal if you did that. You start looking and saying, oh, yeah, you're normal. You're pretty average. And you're pretty smart, but those three over there, they're kind of stupid. They're a little dim with it. Like, I got to tell this nigga the same thing 4 times. In his own language. Yeah, it's bad. And here we are paying the price for it. The thing is that we have to pay the price in front of every other group of people. In Africa, we got to pay the price in front of each other and in front of the non-Africans. And they're cherry-picked to a certain extent. Or rather, they have an advantage when they go. Because they don't go to Africa with nothing anyway. In the Caribbean, we got to pay for any stupidity or dysfunction on our part in front of each other and in front of non-African Caribbean people. In North America, we got to pay for our stupidity or dysfunction or just not being exceptional even in front of each other and in front of everybody else. So even when we're just the same as anyone else, we're still depicted even to ourselves as being just subpar. Yeah, of course, that leads to frustration when you begin to realize that you just have an uphill climb other people don't have to get the same stuff. Yeah, it leads to a sense of frustration. And one of the things I'm going to say is that when you do become righteous, no matter what your background is, when you decide to live a righteous way of life, especially if it's Islam, you're going to have financial struggles, either temporarily or permanently, that others won't. If you're righteous and you ain't Muslim, you're going to have some struggles. Eventually, you're allowed to benefit from interest in your own frame of reference, and you will. Now add to that being Muslim and you're practicing Muslim, serious about it, you're not allowed to benefit from any sort of interest. So yeah, you're going to have financial struggles. You're not going to be able to understand. You're not going to be able to sit back and say, well, my retirement is already fixed and figured out. In most cases, you're not going to be able to sit up and say, well, I know what I'm going to do about property ownership, because if you can't buy it without paying interest, you can't have it. Not if you're going to really practice this. And God never walks around. I mean, God doesn't walk around us anyway, but he never just goes through any houses of worship, whether the religions are true or not, and just bless the men therein with a lot of money because they're practicing and they're very worshipful. And, they should be able to get married while they're young because that's better for their morality. No, that doesn't happen. If you're Muslim, it really doesn't happen. And that's the truth of it. Meanwhile, poor Haiti is still taking a beating centuries after fighting for their independence and freedom because they dared to stand up and resist. Still, like they ain't never gonna be done. Even when they finish paying off the debt to France, they still have not finished suffering. Imagine. It's to the point that the people there have to fight each other over bones because there's always still somebody else there taking the meat out. And the fight's gotten so bad that Kenyan police are being deployed. Number one, they're not soldiers. Number two, Kenya's not a French-speaking nation. And number three, they definitely are not taught how to speak the Creole French of Haiti. So damn, what they supposed to do? They got to rely on the Haitian police for communication, and the Haitian police are overwhelmed, which is why they're there. And France hadn't protested this. That's how the hell I know that it's not going to help. It ain't going to do nothing. More black people are going to get sent in to die. That's what that is. The fact that France didn't say anything against it tells me everything right there. If foreign but still black help needs to be relied upon, do you know who I would love to see sent over there? Police or soldiers from Burkina Faso and Mali and Niger, from that tri-state alliance that is really ticking them white folk off. Now, France would have a conniption fit if those guys were in Haiti helping the police to restore law and order and getting them gangs in check. Or even so much as saying to the gangsters, listen, you can come with us back and join the militaries of our nations and stand up to the French, or we'll execute you like dogs over here when we catch you shooting civilians. That would tick the French off, I'm pretty sure. But these things that are actually going to be solutions for us are always out of reach. And yeah, black folk, I don't understand how it is that black folk continue with what he would refer to as magical thinking when magic has never been allowed to help our people out. That's the legitimate part of the frustration. I don't know how much longer it's going to remain this way. I myself am never going to move back to the US if I have to lift a finger of sacrifice to make it a great place for black folk to live, especially for black men, because I already lost a good chunk of my childhood trying to do that, trying to awaken other young black folk when I wasn't even fully grown yet. I already lost it. My brother did. He lost more of his childhood than I lost of mine. My parents are mentally exhausted now because the black population of our hometown eventually just turned their back on anyone that struggled for them, including them. Most of the pro-black population of our hometown eventually at some point sold out and cashed in, and my parents didn't. And then when my parents found that sometimes people that were thought or assumed to be biased against us were not, then they were considered to be sellouts without actually cashing in. So I understand the frustration. That part's true and it's valid. even when the conclusions are not. That is. But what I can tell you is that there came a time when I began to look into what I've been telling you as a solution, and I found that it was in no way responsible for the frustration. It was just merely illiterate niggas of many races and national backgrounds that didn't learn the instructions that made it worse. But it was not the instructions themselves. And that hopelessness and that frustration and the permanence of that frustration left. And then the frustration became an occasional nuisance. I hope that this information helps some of you. Thank you for listening. And as always, black heart, black mind, black out. Assalamu alaikum. And black heterosexual non-select male power just because they don't like it in a black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day. Thanks for flying with us again here on Jet Black Airways, where the phrase jet black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with us until the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender justice forever.